Hey everybody, welcome back to Moonmen TCG. Today we're diving into the color blue, some of its strengths, its various weaknesses, and really what's bringing it down as a color as a whole. Let's dive right into it. So we only recently got access to enough cards to build a legal 50-card blue deck. As a result, me as well as most of the community has been playing a lot of blue lately, just to test it out, see what we haven't been able to play so far. Personally, I'm not very impressed with the results. Blue has felt very underwhelming as a color so far, and part of it is limited card pool, but that's not really all we can attribute it to. Let's throw the numbers of cards revealed on the screen for a second. So these numbers are obviously only what we have revealed so far. By the time this video has been uploaded, I imagine we will have a few additional reveals. But where we stand right now, the gap from lowest number of cards revealed to highest is only 6 cards in green to red. And blue isn't even the color with the least number of cards revealed. Green is. Yet green has been performing exceptionally well overall. I will say you note here that I did not include leaders, but I don't think that that's that big of a sway in any direction. Red and green would just get one more card each because they're the only ones with more than one leader at the moment. The two best decks in the game by far at the moment are purple and green. Yet purple and green are right alongside sandwiching blue with number of cards revealed. So clearly it's not just a limited card pool that's holding blue back. Even though it's the most recent color to get access to a full deck, it is not the color with the least number of cards, and all of the colors are currently suffering from a limited card pool. It's problems that we have with the color overall, the cards that have been revealed. And if we compare these cards in the blue strategies to that of the other colors, we can see innate weaknesses. The first thing I want to talk about in regards to this is blue's form of removal. The only method blue currently has to remove cards from the board, other than the obvious swinging into a character, which any color can do, is to return them to your opponent's hand, or as we'd normally say, bouncing them to your hand. The difference here is that if you bounce a card to your opponent's hand as opposed to straight up remove it, your opponent then gains access to that card again. It gives you a big tempo advantage. It means that you can be proactive in a way, but at the end of the day, you are using a card such as Sables, and they are not losing their card, it's just going to their hand. If you were to compare this to a card, say Gum Gum Jet Pistol, where you're going 1 for 1, you'll notice that blue starts to slowly lose card advantage. Some of blue's cards that bounce get even worse than that. For example, Alvida, the attacker, requires you to discard an additional card to return a card to your opponent's hand. And then Alvida will likely die since she is a now arrested character and can be swung into. So you're realistically likely losing 2 cards in exchange for some tempo. Now for all of you that have played Magic the Gathering before, you might be thinking that this is very similar to how blue operates in that game. In Magic the Gathering, blue's almost exclusive form of removal is also bouncing cards to your opponent's hand. But there's also something that distinctly separates there and here, and that is the next point we're going to go into. Blue has a very noticeable lack of card draw, or really any way to gain advantage to your hand. This is where we see the distinct difference between what we do here and where we are in Magic the Gathering. In Magic the Gathering, blue is known as the bounce color, but it is also distinctly known as the color with the best card draw. Because you're getting all of these tempo plays that make you lose advantage, you need to be able to replenish that by drawing cards from your deck, regaining that advantage you've lost. And we just don't see that in blue. Now you might be thinking we don't really see that in any color. And you're not entirely wrong. The game is very new and we haven't seen a lot of ways to replenish hand. But if we look to the other colors, we can actually see quite a few cards to help you gain advantage that blue just doesn't really have as much access to. Let's go over it real quick. So let's look at red first. Red recently got this excellent Nami, and the Nami gives you a card to replace itself in hand. But it doesn't only do that, it's not just replacing itself, it's letting you choose from the top 5 cards of your deck to replace itself with as soon as it is played. And it basically grabs you almost any card in your mono red Straw Hats deck. And then gives you a beater, now granted only a 2000 power beater, but in red that's really easy to work with. Then we look over to green. We have this killer that will be able to draw a card when it's used to block, so it's going to block an attack and then also draw a card back. It is conditional, but that condition isn't really that hard to meet. And it also has Raizo, which is also conditional, but every time it gets an attack, it's guaranteed to get you a card draw. Pretty much overall. The longer you can keep it alive, the more cards you're going to be drawing. It really is a solid amount of card draw. And then if we were to look at purple, the best color in the game, granted, it has access to Sasaki, which gives you a beater and replaces itself with automatic card draw no matter what, unconditionally. And then even better, it has Queen, which not only replaces itself, but lets you draw 2 cards and then filter out a dead card from your hand. So all of these colors have all of this awesome card draw. Now, let's take a look at what blue has access to. And unfortunately, if we're talking about in comparison to the cards we just saw, there's really only one card we can even discuss. Mr. 2 Bone Clay is the only real way to add cards from your deck to your hand that isn't just purely filtering. It's card draw coupled with a purpose, in the same way that Raizo was, in the same way that Killer was, or Queen was. But there are some problems with this card. It only grabs event cards with Baroque Warps in its type, which means that it's really easy to whip off of. I've had it happen to me a few times. Now, I imagine it will become harder and harder to whiff as more and more cards come out. We're putting more events in our deck, but even still, we can't just completely flood our deck with events. It is also worth bringing up Miss All Sunday. Well, she is not card draw, she is card advantage. In the same way that Killer serves a purpose and then nets you a card by blocking and then getting a card, Miss All Sunday does the same thing. However, she does require an event in drop, not hard to do in this deck, but it is worth noting. And it is also more limited options as opposed to deck thinning. And deck thinning is basically one of the best things you can do in the game. We could also bring up Baroque Works, but I didn't bring up the cards similar to Baroque Works, such as In 2 Years to Sabati, because they filter, they deck thin, but I wouldn't call them card draw as much, even though they kind of technically are, because they do not serve an additional purpose. It is just replenishing cards from hand. So I guess the criteria I was looking for in this particular moment was more about card draw coupled with doing something else, as opposed to just Upstart Goblin, a card from Yu-Gi-Oh! Where you just play it, you draw 1 card. We're looking for cards that advance your board state, advance your game plan, and then also net you cards in hand. Cards like Baroque Works don't actually net you advantage, they go even. They are deck thinning, but it does not grant you additional cards, whereas a card that on attack draws a card is a card that serves a purpose, such as attacking, and then also replenishes itself, netting you excess advantage. While editing this video, I did also just now in this moment realize that I did not bring up Love Beam. Love Beam is what we're looking for in the form of using a card for a purpose and then drawing a card. It is actual advantage. However, the draw it's still only a 1-for-1. It does stop an attack, and that's important, but it's also a very conditional draw that requires you to already be at a disadvantage. A great card, don't get me wrong. I enjoy it a lot. I've liked it since it was revealed. But if your cards require you to be at a disadvantage in order to be useful, you can already see the direction the color is going. Now, you might be thinking here that the cards that blue has access to aren't that far below the other colors. You're not entirely wrong, but there are 3 things worth bringing up, 1 point for each of the cards that get advantage. In terms of Love Beam, you already need to be at a disadvantage to use it, and that's big. In terms of Mr. 2, it's very easy to whiff, and it shoehorns your deck building in an extremely specific way, and that's important. In terms of Miss All Sunday, it does require you to have already used event cards in order to be useful. It's dead before then, and it also doesn't thin your deck at all. It gets you advantage, but isn't deck thinning. None of those things are that far below the other colors. The problem is that when you're comparing them to the other colors, blue is running things like Sables, where your opponent, you're going neg1. Officer Agents, where you're going neg1. Thrust Pad Cannon, where you're going neg1. Your opponent's cards are going even or plussing, and you're constantly negging. Because of this, your cards that are gaining you advantage should be better than the other colors. You should be gaining more excess cards, not less excess cards, in order to keep up with the advantage of the game. Getting tempo is important. Making these tempo plays is important. It's what's defining blue as a color. But we haven't seen anything yet that can really replenish all of the cards you're losing from hand to make these tempo plays. So how the average blue game ends up playing out is you start off really strong, you're doing a lot of cool early game things, you get a lot of tempo, and then you just run into a wall. You have nowhere to go anymore. Your opponent has so much advantage over you, they can just take their sweet time and kill you from there, and you're basically defenseless from it. We've been hoping for some cards like maybe a stage card that lets you draw every turn, a stage that you can rest to draw a card, a stage that you can rest when you play an event to draw a card. But we really need cards to push blue over the edge, or else it's just going to fade away and die in set 1, because nothing we have currently seen can bring it to where it needs to be. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe. You can find me on Twitch and on Patreon. The links will be in the description, and I'll see you next time.